I've been married for 3 years to a kind and loving husband. We were very close, but we didn't have children yet. We were both excited for that day to come, until the accident changed everything. My husband was kind to everyone, not just me. My parents adored him, too. I also have a sister who is very focused on her career. Even though she was always busy with work, she and my husband got along well. Then, my husband's job suddenly became very demanding. He started working late, even on weekends, and was constantly on his phone, staying in touch with his team. Looking back, some people might have thought something was suspicious, but I never doubted him. I only worried about his health. One day, my sister decided to move to a new apartment because of her job. She needed new furniture, so I planned to take her shopping in my car. However, on the day of our trip, Saturday, my boss called me unexpectedly. I had to go to the office. Since this was my sister's only free day, I didn't want to cancel. Then I remembered my husband had the day off. I asked him if he could take my sister shopping instead. He hesitated for a moment but then agreed. With your sister? That might be a little awkward, but okay. My car is in the shop, can I use yours? I was so grateful for his help. While he took my sister shopping, I rushed to the office. It was the first time they had gone out together alone. I wondered if they were getting along, if they had found the right furniture, and if we could all meet for dinner later. By the time I finished work, it was already dark. I took out my phone to call them, then I got a call from an unknown number. Hello? Am I speaking to Daniel's family member? It was a stranger's voice. Yes, I'm his wife. This is the police. Your husband has been in an accident. The officer told me that the car my husband was driving had crashed. Both he and his female passenger were unconscious. I don't remember much after that. I just remember rushing to the hospital. When I arrived, the receptionist took me to the ICU. Through the glass, I saw my husband. He was covered in bandages, hooked up to machines. My mother, who lived far away, came as soon as she could. We stayed at the hospital, anxiously waiting for any updates. Later, the police told us what had happened. They said my husband was driving on a clear road when another car ran a red light and hit him. The other driver was badly injured and was being treated in the same hospital. However, that driver said my husband's car had been moving strangely before the crash. The police suspected that my husband might have fallen asleep at the wheel. After a few days, both my husband and sister woke up. The doctors ran tests and then called us in to discuss the results. They told us that although they would survive, they might suffer from permanent disabilities. Still, my mother and I were just relieved they were alive. We stayed positive and focused on helping them recover. We didn't tell them about the possibility of lasting injuries, we just encouraged them. My mother took care of my sister, while I looked after my husband. At first, my husband was in shock. He felt guilty for the trouble he had caused everyone. But as time passed, he started to change. He became frustrated, angry at his injured leg, at the hospital treatments, and at the fact that he had to quit his job. He was no longer the kind man I knew. Even though he pushed me away, I kept visiting him, trying to support him. Then one day, a police detective came to the hospital. The police detective told me they had discovered something about the accident. Apparently, the brake oil in my car had been leaking. That meant I could have had an accident at any time. It also explained why the car had been acting strangely before the crash. Meanwhile, the woman who crashed into my car was still in bad condition. Her mother came to the hospital to apologize. It was my first time meeting her. After that, my husband's behavior toward me became even worse. He was furious that I could move freely while he was stuck in bed. He also hated that I couldn't stay at the hospital all day because of work. He started ordering me around, throwing things at me, and lashing out when I didn't do exactly what he wanted. He even got angry when I left to buy my own lunch. His demands kept getting worse. I felt bad for him, but I had no choice. I had to work to keep us financially stable. On top of that, I was constantly talking to the police, coordinating with the hospital, and trying to keep everything together. I barely had time to breathe. My husband's attitude was wearing me down. I felt trapped. My sister was also struggling, and my mother was getting more exhausted every day. Since my mother didn't work, my sister completely relied on her, making endless demands. Then, one day, both my husband and my sister found out the truth. Their paralysis was permanent, even with rehab. That's when everything got worse. My sister confronted me. "I heard your car was leaking oil," she said coldly. "You were responsible for maintaining it. Because of that, I can't work, and I'll never get my body back to normal. Mom is miserable, and your husband is in the same condition. You have to take care of both of us for the rest of your life." Her words hit me like a slap. I called my mother, but she just sighed. "She's been acting like this for a while," she said. I'm too exhausted to go to the hospital today. Despite everything, I still went to check on my husband. When I didn't find him in his room, I looked around and eventually spotted him sitting in the common room, with my sister. It was late, and the visiting hours were almost over. The room was empty except for them. "Hey," I said, walking over. My husband glared at me. "I heard that if you had just taken the car in for an inspection, this wouldn't have happened." "Yeah, but you're the reason your sister and I are like this," he snapped. "The insurance will cover some things, but you're responsible for taking care of us for the rest of our lives." "Got it." Something inside me snapped. Since when were they so close? I narrowed my eyes. "You two hadn't seen each other in ages before the accident, right?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. My husband ignored my question. "You know what you have to do." My sister didn't even look at me. She just nodded, agreeing with him. I already knew I wouldn't get an answer. I kept asking questions, hoping, maybe foolishly, that they would understand how I felt. "I wonder if the woman who crashed into my car is doing any better now," I said. "How should I know?" my sister snapped. "She ran into us when the traffic light was red. It's just unbelievable." "Exactly," my husband chimed in. "It was terrifying. We should make sure to get some compensation from her. And I was so close to getting a promotion, too. If I didn't cut in, they'd just keep complaining." It was time to expose the truth. "There's something I need to tell you," I said. They both looked at me. "What?" "First of all, I had my car inspected before the accident." My sister scoffed. "Did you? Then the dealer should be sued. There's no way they didn't know the brake oil was leaking." "I know, right?" I said, my voice calm. "So, right after the accident, the police called me. They wanted to determine the cause and asked to check my drive recorder." I paused, watching their reactions. "But that old drive recorder? It doesn't record sound. It also doesn't start recording until after an accident happens, so you'd think there'd be nothing useful on it." "I see," my husband muttered. "It's just like I thought. You didn't know I had installed a new drive recorder." My sister looked up in shock. "What?" "I also installed a camera inside the car." She went pale. Modern drive recorders start recording with even the slightest vibration," I continued. "The police contacted me. They reviewed the data." My husband looked confused. My sister looked so pale I thought she might faint. "You were up to something, weren't you?" I said, staring directly at her. "What do you mean?" she stammered. "You did something to the car," I accused. Panic flashed across my husband's face. "Oh, do you talk to my sister like that? You sound like you're jealous of her." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" He stopped talking, his face stricken. "I told you earlier, just a slight vibration triggers the recording," I said, "and guess what? So many intimate scenes between you two were caught on camera." I was mortified when the police asked me if that was my sister in the car with my husband. The blood drained from his face. "You've been having an affair this whole time," I said coldly. "You had me completely fooled." Desperate, my husband tried to shift the blame. "Scarlett isn't the only one at fault here." At that moment, a small, frail woman stepped into the room. It was the mother of the woman who had crashed into my car. I had asked her to come. "Don't you have anything to say to her?" I asked my sister and husband. My sister looked startled. "Who's this?" "She's the mother of the woman who crashed into you," I said. "The woman you keep blaming, the woman who should be paying for this, right?" Surprised by the woman's tear-streaked face, my husband fell silent. "She's also the mother of the woman who was your victim," I continued. "Her name is Elizabeth. I'm sure you know who she is." Hearing the name, my husband turned deathly pale. My sister started panicking. What is this?" she stammered. "You knew the woman who was driving? That means she knew it was your car. That crash wasn't an accident. Who is she?" Since my husband had gone silent, I answered for him. "She was having an affair with Daniel," I said. "He told her he'd divorce me soon, but he didn't, and when Elizabeth lied to him, saying she was pregnant, Daniel told her to get an abortion." My sister's mouth fell open. "After that, he cut her off. She couldn't reach him, and she wanted revenge. She wanted to hurt me." My sister's eyes widened in horror. "Wait, so that means—" "That's right," I said. "You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time." She let out a shaky breath, her whole body trembling. "I can't believe I let something like this ruin my life," she whispered. "The reality is that no matter how much you cry or scream, there's nothing you can do about it." "Oh, so it's not like this happened to an innocent person," my sister muttered. I put all my emotions into my words. "Now you understand what really happened. The two of you were having an affair behind my back, and Scarlett tried to have me injured, or worse, by tampering with my car's brakes. But then she got in the car herself and became a victim of her own scheme." I was the one who suffered, yet I was willing to give you a chance. If you had apologized, if you had confessed everything while you were in the hospital, I would have at least considered not divorcing you, but instead, you treated me like I was the one at fault. I took a deep breath. Do you remember how we filled out our divorce papers right after we got married? I never thought I'd actually use them, but today, I did. I submitted them. You and I are no longer married. Goodbye. With that, I turned and left the dim, silent hospital. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt free. However, my mother was devastated when she learned the truth. Not only was she reeling from my sister's betrayal, but she was also overwhelmed by the realization that she would now have to care for her disabled daughter alone. Despite cutting ties with Daniel and Scarlett, I couldn't bring myself to abandon my mother entirely, so I met with Elizabeth, the woman responsible for the accident. I apologized on behalf of my family and arranged for compensation to support my sister, who had, unintentionally, been caught in the accident. At the very least, I didn't want my mother to bear that financial burden. 2 years later, Daniel and I are divorced, and I've built a new life on my own. At the time, my coworkers were shocked. Daniel and I had always been seen as a close couple, but after the divorce, something strange happened. More and more men started approaching me, asking for advice, as if I had suddenly become more desirable. But I wasn't ready to date again. My ex-husband's betrayal still lingered in the back of my mind, making it difficult to open my heart to someone new. Instead, I threw myself into self-improvement. I studied hard for a certification exam to advance my career, eventually enrolling in an online business school that fit around my work schedule. Back when I was married, I never imagined I'd have the ambition to pursue something like this. I never envied my sister for being a career woman, and I certainly never thought I would aspire to be one. But somehow, without even realizing it, I had started walking a different path. Life is strange that way. As for Daniel, he moved back in with his parents, but his family sees him as a burden. His relatives blame him for his mistakes and how he treated me, and from what I hear, he isn't coping well. He's grown unstable, lashing out and causing problems for those around him. Scarlett also returned home, but her mental state deteriorated. She remained selfish and demanding, exhausting my mother to the point where she eventually made a difficult decision. She used my sister's savings and accident compensation to place her in a care home. My mother consulted me first, but I had no objections. After everything, I told her she could do whatever she saw fit. Had I not uncovered the truth when I did, I might have remained their prisoner forever. But instead, I passed my certification exam and was promoted to a role where I could finally put my skills to use. And somewhere along the way, I found happiness again. I grew close to the teacher who ran my online business school. We are soon to be married, not to someone who is just kind to everyone, but to someone who is truly kind to me. When I work late, he comes home early to make dinner. He makes me feel safe, valued. And so, as I finish another long day, I send my thoughts to the stars and hurry home, to the place where my partner is waiting for me.